All right, let's dive straight into this. Today we're unpacking a case that literally defies all logic. It's the intensely chilling story of Elena Cross. Now, the thing you have to know about Elena is that she was a completely ordinary woman, just someone you might pass on the street or smile at in the hallway, who suddenly vanished without a single trace. We're going to break down the physical evidence, the timeline, and the really bizarre structural anomalies of her building to try and understand exactly how someone simply ceases to exist.
Picture this. It's October 14th, 11:47 p.m. That is the exact moment the very last light flickers off in a fourth-floor window of a quiet apartment complex right on the edge of town. And by the next morning, that flickering light would be the absolute last sign of life anyone ever saw from apartment 402. It's absolutely crucial to establish our baseline here. Elena was just 26 years old. She was a freelance graphic designer. She had zero enemies, absolutely zero debts, and absolutely no reason in the world to disappear.
So, Section 1, the ordinary night and a quiet neighbor. To really grasp the sheer impossibility of this mystery, we've got to look at her timeline. Elena had lived in apartment 402 for almost 3 years. And think about that. 3 years in one single place, you establish a pretty solid rhythm, right? Her neighbors described her as incredibly quiet, super polite, and always the first to wave good morning. She worked from home most days. Her life was incredibly predictable, which makes her last night so jarring. At 11:30 p.m., the downstairs neighbor, Walter Doyle, hears pacing footsteps, followed by her door opening and closing. The very next morning, she completely ghosts a scheduled video call with a client. And by the afternoon, she misses a lunch date with her sister Priya. Now, missing lunch with Priya was entirely 100% out of character for Elena. This precise sequence really shows you exactly how fast her totally normal life just stopped.
Which brings us to Section 2, an impossible crime scene inside apartment 402.
When Priya realized her sister was missing, she didn't wait around. She drove straight over to the apartment complex. And when she and the police finally forced their way inside, the physical constraints of what they found were just staggering. The deadbolt was locked from the inside. We're talking about the kind of lock that can only be turned with a key from the outside or manually by hand from within. Every single window had been painted shut by the landlord years ago. There was no back exit, no fire escape. Her phone, her wallet, and her keys were just sitting there entirely untouched on the kitchen counter. Her car was still parked in the lot. We are looking at a classic terrifying locked room mystery here. There was no physical way in or out that anyone could explain.
And right in the middle of all that heavy, impossible security, police found this incredibly eerie little detail. A single teacup on the small, round dining table. Still warm, as if she had just stepped away for a fraction of a second mid-sip. Over in the kitchen, it gets weirder. The stove was also still warm, with a half-cooked meal sitting completely abandoned in the pan.
The sheer bafflement of the investigators handling this anomaly really cannot be overstated. Detective Marcus Ferreira, the lead on the case, gave this powerful quote. He basically said it was the cleanest disappearance I've seen in 20 years on the force, like she evaporated. When a 20-year veteran tells you someone simply evaporated from a locked box, you know the physical evidence, or the lack of it really, is completely unprecedented.
But as investigators tore through the apartment, they finally found a physical crack in the locked room theory. In Elena's bedroom, the closet doors were left slightly ajar, and hidden behind a row of hanging winter coats was a section of drywall that had been recently patched. It was fresh, it was white, it was barely dry. Someone, or something, had physically altered the structure of that apartment from the inside.
Let's move to Section 3, scratching in the walls and Walter Doyle's report.
That freshly patched drywall prompted the cops to look a lot closer at the building itself and actually listen to the downstairs neighbor, Walter Doyle. He told police something he had been brushing off for months. Late at night, he'd been hearing these strange scratching sounds coming from inside the walls, and he was really specific about this. These were not rodents. The sounds were far too rhythmic, way too deliberate. He'd actually complained to the landlord twice about this, but surprise, surprise, nothing was ever done. You can see how this impossible mystery is slowly peeling back its layers to reveal something far more sinister built right into the architecture itself.
So investigators take tools to that wet drywall in Elena's closet. When they cut it open, they found an old maintenance shaft. It was this hollow, incredibly narrow vertical space, barely 2 feet wide, running directly between the walls of the building. It was an original feature that had been completely sealed off decades earlier, when the building underwent renovations back in the 1970s. It was a hidden drop right there inside her bedroom.
But the terrifying part isn't just that the shaft was there, it's what they found inside it. The heavy dust on the floor of that hidden shaft showed distinct drag marks, and they were human-sized. Police followed these marks down through this dark vertical drop, tracking them until they reached a literal brick wall. The shaft just dead-ended, 3 floors down, having been bricks shut generations ago. The physical evidence led straight into solid masonry and stopped completely.
Which leads us to Section 4, the 1979 connection, and a forgotten room.
After hitting that literal brick wall, the case goes completely cold for months. It was essentially filed away as an unexplained disappearance, but 4 months later, a massive historical twist breaks the entire investigation wide open. Construction crews renovating the building's basement broke through an old brick wall, which was likely the very same masonry at the bottom of that shaft, and they discovered a second hidden room. This space had been long forgotten, totally sealed up since before Elena Cross was even born. And inside this dark, hollowed-out space beneath the building, they found just 3 things: a chair, a blanket, and a journal.
Now here's the absolute kicker. That journal did not belong to Elena. It belonged to a woman named Carol Whitmore. Carol was a tenant who vanished from this exact same apartment building back in 1979 under eerily similar circumstances. But back then, her disappearance was just quietly closed and dismissed as a simple runaway case. Finding Carol's 1979 journal completely shifts the context of Elena's modern-day disappearance. We aren't looking at an isolated incident anymore, we are looking at a terrifying pattern.
The police opened Carol's journal, and the final entry, dated just days before she vanished in 1979, read, "Someone else lives in these walls. I don't think I'm the first." Just let that sink in for a second. A horrific historical secret written down decades ago, predicting the exact same fate that would eventually find Elena Cross. So the fundamental question still remains. What on earth happened to Elena Cross? How does a woman evaporate from a locked room, leaving only human-sized drag marks in a forgotten shaft and a warning from a ghost from 1979?
And that brings us to Section 5, an unsolved mystery. No body found. To this very day, Elena Cross has never been found. There's no body, there's no confirmed suspect, there are absolutely no further clues beyond that hidden room in the basement and that decades-old journal. Detective Ferreira eventually retired, a couple of years after Elena's case went cold. But in his final interview, he shared this incredibly haunting admission that still really troubles investigators. He said, "The scratching in the walls didn't stop after we found that room. Tenants in that building still report it, even now. The physical investigation ended, but the anomaly within the building's architecture continues."
And get this, since Elena vanished, apartment 402 has been rented out exactly 3 more times. Every single one of those tenants has fled the apartment in less than 6 months, and not a single one of them ever gave a reason for leaving. They simply packed up their lives and ran.
So, I want you to think about the physical space around you right now. If you're watching this deep dive at night, alone, maybe in an older building, you might want to take a quick second and check your walls. Because the case of Elena Cross teaches us that some buildings don't just hold people, some of them keep them.